Good evening. It is 6:14 p.m. on Tuesday, November the 12th, and I sincerely apologize to everyone. I thought policy was tomorrow, and so I was down at Sports Awards night for North down the hall, and so they had to call me to get me to come down. So tonight we have myself, we have Mr. Johnson, and we have Mr. Posca. All right, which is too bad too, because I know that Ms. Darling had some questions that we had gotten the answers for, which is too bad. Okay. So the first item on the list, it's 3 policies together. AC-R, which used to be JBAA-R, and then also GBAA. So just a little background on this. We had brought JBAA-R forward last month, and that is the contacts for who to call if you have a Title IX question or if you have a concern about any kind of sexual harassment. But then as Mr. Posca and I were looking into it, we discovered that we didn't have a JBAA because the School Board Association took JBAA and another policy, AC, and combined them. And so we had adopted that AC previously, but not gone back and looked at JBAA. We just got rid of it. So what I'm suggesting that we do is take JBAA-R and rename it, update it with the correct contact information, and then rename it ACR so that it is associated with the sexual discrimination, sexual harassment, and sexual violence policy.
Yep.
The other option is then to have, as we previously had, the same policy in 3 places, which I don't love as much.
It doesn't make sense.
So, so that's that one. And then we also have GBAA, which is the same policy, but for staff. And my suggestion is that we keep all of it together in one place under AC, because it is an overarching policy that touches on every individual in the district. Did I miss anything?
Nope, you're absolutely right. And I think as we got into the research of this, the history of this is in 2019, the HR department did update all of those and put them all under the umbrella of AC. But JBAA and GBAA was still there. This shifts everything under that same umbrella and promotes some consistency, as Ms. Ramos was discussing previously.
Yeah, and just for reference, the GBAA, which is for staff, hasn't been updated since 2015. So AC has the appropriate policy guidelines and contact information. All right, so the motions I'm going to make is that I think the motion I want is that we rename JBAA-R AC and adopt the updates to the contact information.
I think that would be correct, and I think in the process of doing that, we are rescinding JBAA-R by renaming it AC-R.
Yeah, because we're not getting rid of it, we're just changing the letters. So rename AC-R and rename, I gotta write it down properly, rename JBAA-R ACR and adopt the updated contact information, which is really just adding McCarthy instead of Elm Street. Was there another change?
There was only one. It was the program coordinator for Brentwood Academy and Franklin Street Preschool.
Okay, so McCarthy and Brentwood. Okay. All right.
I'll make the motion.
Okay, and I guess I'll second it. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. And so now I'm going to move that we rescind GBAA, because it is included, I'm going to write that down, because included in AC. Okay. All right. Do you want to second that, Mr. Johnson?
I'll second that.
Okay. All right. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Thank you. All right. So the next one we have is EEAEA, which is mandatory drug and alcohol testing of school bus drivers and contracted carriers. It's mostly school bus drivers, but also the special education. I think we have a couple like minivans and a couple other vehicles that we contract with. And so this policy is required by law under, I forget which one is the most updated one. I think RSA 237, is that the one that was just updated?
Yes.
All right, RSA 237, medical examination of school bus drivers. And RSA 189-13A, school employee and voluntary background investigations. And then there's some federal laws as well. So we last looked at this policy in 2012. And since then, we now contract through First Student. This new policy updates the changes in the law, and it still applies. And Mr. Posca has been in contact with First Student, who have reviewed the policy and confirmed that they are in fact following it.
That is correct.
Correct, okay. And the background checks for school bus drivers are part of a different policy. We are still doing that. So this doesn't eliminate anything, it actually adds protections. Any questions?
One question would be, it has the contracted carriers, drivers of vehicles designed to transport 16 or more passengers. Is the smallest vehicle still 16 or more, or do we have anything that would carry less?
I think we do have a couple minivans, right?
I mean, we don't have any personally. I think everything we would be I think we do have some of the smaller buses, but that would be the 16.
Okay. So nothing
occupancy.
that's like an 8-passenger or?
Not that we own. I think First Student might have some vans that they might utilize for some of those, but that's kind of what we're contracting out for and part of that process. So I think part of this piece here is really, when I spoke to First Student, is that and I gave them a copy of this policy to make sure that this is what we're following. They said, this is a minimum of what they do. They actually, in some cases, they go above and beyond.
Beyond, okay.
Yep. And I think our expectation is that all of the school bus drivers are having the criminal background check and that they're having mandatory testing.
Yep.
Because, and I think First Student takes this just as seriously as we do.
Yeah.
Okay. So I move to send EEAEA to the full board
Second.
as presented. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Oh, I have turned it off.
It's okay.
Okay, there we go. All right, so the next one is FF, which is naming school facilities or areas within a facility. We here in Nashua have a process that's been in place, I don't know, it was last approved in 2013, but I don't think it was written in 2013. I think we've had the process for quite some time for naming rights to school facilities and then areas within the school. And so most recently, we had a request over at South for the weight room. There was a Make-A-Wish project where Make-A-Wish came in and redid the weight room and renamed it Smiley's Weight Room, or I forget what it's called exactly. The gym over at South is named after a person as well. And so this policy really outlines the information that the board looks for when naming a facility. And I remember using it for that one and for McCarthy as well. In order for us to name part of our schools after someone, they really have to be someone who's made a significant contribution to our school district. And that's not to minimize some of the other community partnerships we have, but typically what we do, like BAE donated these giant tanks for underwater robotics and some other things, they have a plaque. It says donated by, which is different than naming. So I don't really have any other comments on it.
No, I think just to that point, Ms. Raymond, I think one of the reasons why this policy has come up is that we hadn't reviewed it since 2013. So this gives an opportunity to kind of talk about, as Ms. Raymond talked about, the different processes that we've gone through in the last several years, and we've been consistent with this policy, and this policy is fitting our needs at this time. So the recommendation was to just accept this as it was reviewed and updated here in November of 2024.
Yep. And so we have gotten requests, and typically what happens if someone says, hey, my uncle was a long-term coach and, we'd like to name a field after him. This policy lays out the details that we would be asking them for. And so we ask the person or organization who's requesting the name to provide us with all of these details. And then the board creates an ad hoc committee of board members and generally people within the district to decide whether it's appropriate. So if there's no questions, I move that we send it to the full board as is.
Yep, we just have to fix the spell check on the top.
Oh, what happened?
It says naming school facilities or an INRIA.
Change and RIA in title. It's because we updated the formatting. It looks like someone just typoed to area.
Yep.
I'm so glad you caught that. All right, I've circled it and made a little star. You see it?
I don't, no, mine.
On the copy in the
packet, okay.
Yeah, in the
where it's been
packet.
updated.
Gotcha.
Oh, I'm glad
Might
you
have
caught
already
that.
been fixed.
That's what happens when I try and pull up the agenda on my phone. All right, did I make the motion and you seconded it?
I'll second it.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. The next policy is IJOC, volunteers. This is another one that we haven't looked at in well over a decade. There's not a lot of changes to it. We compared it to the New Hampshire School Board Association policy, and I like that one better, so I'm suggesting that we update it. The only difference between ours and the School Boards Association is that the School Board Association calls coaches volunteers. In Nashua, we've redlined that part of this policy because in Nashua, our coaches are district employees. Even if they're only part-time, we consider them district employees and they are subject to the same background checks, code of conduct, ethical codes, and all of our other policies that any other employee would be subject to, including things like a couple years ago, we passed a policy that said that employees of the district cannot be texting with students. They have to use an approved, it's like an app. There's a list of apps that they can choose so that parents are copied on those, right? But I don't really know that we have that. If, someone's grandma comes in as a volunteer, we wouldn't hold her to a standard of not texting her own grandkid. But we would if it was a coach coaching their own child, we would ask them if they're communicating about sports stuff that they follow our policy that we have for employees.
Absolutely. Yes, and I think you said it very well. We had reached out to Ms. Gingras, our athletic director, to get some feedback on this. This was a concern that she brought forward to us. We did follow up with Mr. Baus, our human resource director, as well as Attorney Clausen, who gave us the guidance of that. So the updates you see in your packet denote the guidance we received from Attorney Clausen for this policy.
So the other thing to know is for volunteers, we always love and want volunteers. We absolutely do. And I encourage anybody who has the opportunity to come in and, chaperone a field trip or volunteer to help out at lunch. Or when my kids were in Birch Hill, I used to go every Friday and clean up, reshelve the library because it becomes overwhelming, right? It's really nice. But the policy is very clear that there are background checks for our volunteers. We don't just let anybody in and let them, loose in the building. Even if you're just making copies, you do have to follow the background check system.
So this is something we definitely should let all our PTOs know about, so they, when they're looking for volunteers for events and stuff, they know they have to follow this policy.
There is a form. I don't know where the form is. I think it's in the handbooks.
I think it is in the handbooks.
Yeah, so there's a volunteer assurances form. And I know that when my kids were in elementary school, it went out with the beginning of the year paperwork. Like there was
Yeah, that they have to fill it
all
out.
the forms that you fill out with your contact information. And then the last page was, and if you want to come in, make sure you fill out this form so that we can get your background check going. So I wonder if we should have the form
In the policy?
as attached to the policy or not. Or is it something that changes from year to year?
I think if we went back and I think if we asked the schools to provide the form, we'd see 18 different versions of the same form.
Right.
So I think I think to Mr. Johnson's point, I think it's really more important that the schools and specifically the PTOs and the schools are aware of that. So posting this and sharing this update with the building principals to share with their PTOs, I think is probably more valuable.
Yeah.
Yep. And just while we're on the topic of volunteering and how much we love volunteers, Mr. Posca and I have been talking about, it came up, I think 2 months ago at a policy meeting, social media policies. And so we have a couple that we've been bouncing around. We got some feedback from the New Hampshire School Boards Association. Our volunteers, as part of this policy and just in general, do have to agree to confidentiality. So other kids are not your kid, and so you can't be taking photos while you're on the field trip and posting them to social media because we don't know which students, parents, and guardians are okay with that and which aren't. So just a gentle reminder to people when they're volunteering at school dances and other events, we love having you there. Don't post pictures if it's not your own.
Yeah, I used to run the PTO social media for New Searles, so I was very aware and was in touch with the principal about, photos we could and couldn't use for promoting events.
So I think we might have a new social media person coming on, and so hopefully they can come talk to us in the next couple months about what their vision is and what they think we should craft for a policy.
Absolutely.
So I'm excited about that. All right, so I move that we send.
I did have one question.
Yeah.
Because I have, on the coaches part,
Yep.
we have assistant coaches who receive a stipend are not designated volunteers. Do we have any coaches who do not receive stipends at this time?
All coaches.
There are volunteer coaches who are part of the program, so they would be
Under the volunteer.
correct as designated volunteers, yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Right, so that explains line are not designated volunteers, so.
And I think that's really what we got into when we worked with Ms. Gingras, is that there is a difference between, Mr. Smith, who is the designated assistant coach and receives a stipend for that, and Mr. Jones, who is the volunteer
Right,
assistant.
his kid is on the team and he's helping out and.
Right, and I do think that we've been really lucky, at least with my own kids' sports, to have parents who are willing to do things like run the concession stand at a track meet or, help do the scoreboard if one is needed or like at various levels.
Yes, I was running to Market Basket for every lacrosse game to pick up 20 some odd sandwiches.
Right.
Get to the bus.
So, but our coaches are our employees, and I just wanted to make that clear.
Yep.
All right, so in that case, I do move to send IJOC volunteers to the full board as amended.
Second.
Okay. Oh, aye.
Aye.
Oh, sorry. All in favor, say aye. Aye. It feels so weird to do it when there's just two of us. Like, if you're seconding it. Okay. The next one, I've let it go off again. Sorry, I'll just dial on this. And, it doesn't have a thing. I apologize to everyone. I really thought this was tomorrow because I am apparently not organized, and so I was down the hall.
I think everyone else thought it was tomorrow.
And I came completely unprepared, except for my phone where I have some notes, but not everything I need. Okay, so this policy, remember how I said earlier how inconvenient it is to have a policy in 3 different places? I hate it. However, in this case, we have policy JICG/ADC/GBED. This one is prohibitions regarding the use of and possession of tobacco products, e-cigarettes, and e-liquids in and on school facilities and grounds. So this policy, I'm suggesting that we adopt fully the School Board Association policy because there have been some legal updates since the last time we updated our policy in, I don't know when that was, 2012. The biggest update is that we have included vaping and e-cigarettes as a prohibitive object. We did update our JICG and our behavioral code, JIC, to include vaping. But state law is that staff members as well are prohibited from having e-cigarettes. Not just cigarettes, you can't be vaping on school grounds or having the e-liquids or any of that. And you certainly can't, under any circumstance, can we have an adult giving them to a child.
Right.
Even, a child, well, or an adult student, even if the student is 18, you cannot do that. So that means if your student comes to school with a vape or an e-cigarette, we take it and we don't give it back to them. You have to work it out, adult to adult. So that's the big update here.
In addition to those big updates, I think what the NHSBA policy does do a nice job is with the definitions of what are tobacco products, what is devices, what is e-cigarette, et cetera. So I think all those varied definitions lend some clarity to what exactly it is we're discussing and looking for.
Yeah. The other part I want to note is under the employees section, there are some specific disciplinary processes that happen if you are caught with a vape pen, and those will take effect as soon as this passes the full board. And so a lot of this stuff is coming directly from RSA 126K7. I don't know if it would have to be included in the teacher negotiations when we look at the contract, but it's just very clear that we can't be having these devices. They're dangerous, and the e-liquid is dangerous for kids and their lungs, so we can't have them. So any questions or concerns about that?
So this covers all.
So that's why it's in 3 spots. It covers students, staff, and visitors to our campus.
Okay. Volunteers.
Volunteer. If you're volunteering, do not bring your vaping device into our buildings. If you're here to watch a sporting event, do not step out of the gym 2 feet out of the door and start vaping, or because you wouldn't with a cigarette, but people tend to have a different view on vaping for some reason. So you have to leave school grounds. You cannot be at Stello Stadium vaping as well.
And this is any e-liquid, doesn't have to be just cannabis and tobacco. It can be any.
Can be anything, but especially not cannabis or tobacco.
Right.
So my family is here because we were all at sports night. I don't care which car I have, or you can wait 10 minutes. I apologize, everyone. Where is it? By the gym? Okay, great. My car is by a pole in the parking lot, so that will be helpful. I now have a driver, so
That's good.
it's an exciting time in my life. Apologies to everyone. All right, so I move that we send this combination policy, JICG, ADC, GBED, I'm going to write all 3, to the full board for approval, and that once approved, that this policy have a copy in each of those areas in our policy manual.
Second.
Okay. It's making me rethink the other question, though, that maybe we should have the other one in all three. Well, we'll see what the board says. All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
This one, though, the School Board Association was really clear that it should be in all three.
Yes.
Okay, the next one is JLC, which is student health services and school nurses. And Ms. Lampier, who isn't here tonight, had a question about the hearing screenings. And her question was whether or not what we're doing them and how extensive they are. And so Mr. Pasco got the answer to that.
So we reached out to our head nurse, Gina Lopez. Hearing is part of the kindergarten entrance screening, but it's not something that we do itself. If there is a concern, then the nurses can do a preliminary screening here. But what would that mean? That mean then we'd be telling parents that based upon our preliminary screening, we would want you to go see your own pediatrician to get some follow-up. So nothing that we kind of, more recommendation of parents about what we're seeing in the classrooms to take it forward, but this is not something we're doing regularly for all students. We're doing it on the occasions they come up based upon feedback from teachers and what they're observing in the classrooms.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay. So I move that we send this one to the full board.
Second.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. And then, see, my family could have just sat here for 5 minutes and taken me home instead of leaving a car in the cold parking lot, whatever. The last policy we have tonight is another two-namer. I hate these. Why is that? Are we renaming it, or are we keeping it in both places? No, I know what we're doing. So we pulled out JLI, which was the safety program. But what we discovered is that we have another policy, EB, which we approved, I forgot when.
We've approved recently, I don't have that
I wrote it down in my
exact
notebook.
date with me, but after we reviewed it, we reached out to Christopher Lassard, our head of security, and this had been updated, and the updates were included in policy EB. So basically having JLI and EB, we feel is redundant, so the recommendation is to rescind JLI based upon the fact that most of the information, all the other information does in fact lie with EB.
So I had some questions about this one, because this one was about specific safety plans for each school. And so part of it was like safe routes on and off school at the beginning and end of the school day. Part of it was about making sure driver's ed was done in a safe way. But part of it, when I was reading it, was about, I was thinking about some of our active shooter drill programs. We have some, we have plans for each building about what will be done that can't be discussed in public. And I wondered if this policy had any impact on those, or if those were kind of something separate that because it's non-public, it's not necessarily a policy, it's more of a process with Mr. Lassard.
And I think the feedback we received from Mr. Lassard is that, although here in the policy we're calling a crisis management plan, we also have an emergency operations plan, and those terms and verbiage are used interchangeably. We do have an emergency operations plan that is covered in policy EBCA, which is really why it appears to be happening some redundancy here, so there's an opportunity to rescind JLI.
So the emergency operations plan is EBCA, which makes sense because the J's are student policies, right? About like student behavior codes and that kind of stuff. And the E's are a little bit more overarching. Okay. Any questions, Mr. Johnson?
No questions.
All right, so I move that we rescind JLI, because it's included in EB.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right. I had a whole list in my notebook about other things we were working on. Some of it was the social media policies. We have a policy that I've sent to administration for review regarding behavior at school events. We just talked about vaping, but I'm concerned about, now that I have two kids in sports, it's come to my attention that it's hard to find referees and umpires and
Oh, yeah.
people. And as I've like taken a deep dive into this topic, it's not us.
No.
It seems to be everywhere. And it seems like we've had, not us personally, but in general, there's fans behaving badly. That's making it difficult for officials to want to keep doing the work that they do. And so there's a policy at the School Board Association that I've sent admin to look at, because I'd really like to hear administration and Ms. Gingras' opinion on it, that really says, like, we're here for kids, and if you are going to be disruptive in a way that is, harmful to kids or the umpires or whatever, that's against our policies, and we might have to ask you to leave. With one exception, I don't think we've had a problem here in Nashua, but I'd like to get a policy before we have a problem.
Yeah.
And this one covers like athletic events and any other school event where people might choose to behave in a way that is unsafe or demeaning of our volunteers, our coaches, our players.
And I know Nashua has even stricter rules than the state does as far as students are concerned who act out in a game.
Right, we have high expectations for our student athletes and their behavior, and I don't. We'll see whether it generates some buzz in the community, but I think it's a good thing to say that our events are a safe place for those participating, right? And that we don't want to have people making it unsafe or uncomfortable for our participants. I mean, school is supposed to be, for some of our kids, athletics or drama or band are the thing that keeps them plugged in, and I just don't want to end up in a situation where kids give up or we can't find officials for the things our kids love because we have this epidemic in the country of people behaving badly at events.
Yeah. And we've been lucky. I mean, we've been lucky. I think our parents have been, I've never really seen much issue with our parents. Like, I've seen issues with other schools, but not here.
Knock on wood, I've had a really positive experience, over the last, I don't even want to say how many years, 10 years of my kids being in public school and public school sporting activities and band concerts and stuff here, but I have been to away games where things were not awesome. So I don't want our kids to have that experience in Nashua.
Yeah, I've a lot of that's thanks to our athletic department. I mean, on top of these things and in even taking steps to prevent things from happening.
Yep. But I also want to make sure. So anyways, I've asked them to look into that because I don't want to be burning out umpires or coaches or
Absolutely.
band directors or, drama coaches or I don't even know. We have so many things that kids can do. It's great. That's all I can think of right now that I have in the queue. But I'm sure there's more that I feel like I had a long list. So as always, if there's something you want to see, shoot me an email and I will bring it forward. That's it. All right, and I move to adjourn.
Second.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And so we are adjourned at 6:47 p.m.